going to be the introductory lecture that I was unable to give today at 11:30 and probably won't be able to give today at 2:30 due to connectivity problems. From what I understand, a major fiber optic cable was cut in Brooklyn, causing severe headaches for people who are dependent upon Verizon, but I've also heard issues having to do with Amazon, etc., etc. So, we'll blame it on that for the moment. If this had been an ordinary classroom meeting, I would have written my name up on the board. My name is Amy. Last name is Payne, P-A-Y-N-E. My relevant third-person singular pronouns are she and her. You're welcome to specify yours if you so wish. My email address is amypayne, AMYPAYNE, at umbc.edu. Pretty much all the emails I send to you should come from that. Though as I was having difficulty today with Blackboard, I do have alternate means of sending you emails, but anyway, amypayne at umbc.edu. That's usually the easiest way to get a hold of me, and at least that way you also have a record that you've tried. I don't have an office right now. I don't really have a phone number per se. I have my own cell phone number, but I prefer not to use that if we can avoid it. I do have office hours. I will be available generally on Tuesdays and Thursdays between 1 and 2:15 on Blackboard Collaborate. I'll basically have that open in the background, and I'll be working on another screen, but when you log in, I'll hear that you're there. That is not a lot of time, and I recognize that schedules can be very variable under the best of circumstances, of which these are not. I am frequently available by appointment. Outside of that, just drop me an email and say you want to talk to me, and we'll go from there. Who am I? I am a graduate of UMBC in 1994. I have a dual bachelor's in biology and philosophy. I have a Master of Arts from the University of Pittsburgh in bioethics through their Bioethics Center. I worked for the AIDS Education and Training Center, the Mid-Atlantic one out of University of Pittsburgh for over a year, and we were involved in running a peer education program in the prison system, teaching inmates how to teach each other about HIV and related infectious diseases. And I've seen a lot of prisons in Pennsylvania. I've taught introductory philosophy to a whole slew of undergraduates, but I've also taught, senior citizens and high school students. I guess this is kind of what I do. Okay. I'm not going to keep attendance. I want class to be accessible both synchronously and asynchronously, and no one to be punished for, being able or unable to attend class. Besides, when I was an undergraduate, my professors, figured it was pretty much up to me to whether or not I bothered to show up to class. It's not their doing. But I'll try to make, class accessible and entertaining as I can. I'm supposed to say something about myself as having a hobby. Right. Probably spend way too much time on the internet reading the news, webcomics, etc. Anyway, your grade is going to be based on the following. There will be 3 exams. Each one is worth 20% of your grade. There will be 1 paper worth 25% of your grade. And there will be several quizzes worth 3 points each for a total of 15% of your grade. There will be more than 5 quizzes. And I count the top 5 scores of your quizzes. So if you blow a quiz, if you miss a quiz, whatever, usually in the conduct of class, that would be more applicable, you can make it up with a later quiz. The one paper is going to be about 4 to 6 pages long, of course, with a bibliography. I ask that it be on a subject that's related to what we're doing in class. On the course materials page on Blackboard, there is a document, I believe, called Paper Guidelines for you that gives a basic rundown of what I'm expecting of you for a paper. At any time during the semester, I encourage you to drop me emails and ask questions, or say, I'm thinking about writing about this, or I have no idea what I want to write about. Is this a good reference? Is this a good thesis? And up to and including I'll review drafts and arguments for you. As we get closer to the time that the paper is due, I may cut that off just so I have sufficient time to get them back to you so you can make your comments and respond to my comments rather and get it back to me. This is the class of Don't Panic. Okay. The exams, there will be 3 questions at a minimum on each exam. There will be a review class before the exam, and I'll ask you to pick and answer 2 of the 3 questions. Anybody who needs a longer period of time for the exam and so forth, I can easily accommodate that. Not a problem. Okay. As I go through the lecture, I'll try to point out paper topics as we go. I'll say this would be a nice thing to write a paper on, hint, hint. Your papers right now are due May the 1st. You will post your paper through Direct Submit on Blackboard. And if you have difficulty with that, you'll email it to me. I do ask that you please, if you can, submit your paper in a .doc format. I cannot make comments on PDF. Google Docs is problematic. If you can, please use .doc for submitting documents to me. If that doesn't work for you, you can use RTF or text if necessary. But PDFs are problematic for me. And Google Docs sometimes I'm a little awkward with it. Okay. So you'll post your paper through Direct Submit on Blackboard. I'm going to run every paper through SafeAssign. No, wait, I use Direct Submit. You guys use SafeAssign. Anyway, you'll be submitting your papers through SafeAssign. And it'll be run through the university's plagiarism checker. You will have probably, at least 3 times that you can check your own paper through SafeAssign to give you the opportunity to make sure that you haven't missed any references or any citations that you have forgotten to include. This means I'm going to be pretty intolerant. I will not be tolerant of anything that is plagiarized. I'm giving you every opportunity on your own, under your own recognizance, to do what is best, do what is required of you. And I'm going to be, in a lot of ways, real flexible with you. But I'm doing that so that we can focus on what is the more important thing, which is the arguments, the ideas, the material, things that we're going to, actually cover as comment content rather, in this particular course. Okay. All right. So this particular piece right here, this is a PowerPoint presentation. I use PowerPoint. It just kind of helps to keep me focused. There is a link to this particular PowerPoint on course materials under Blackboard if you want to review it later at your leisure. There will be a link as well. I have another version of this lecture that is, just about the material of the Euthyphro that's available on YouTube, and I'll be sending you a link for that as well as a copy of the syllabus. But, right now, because this first introductory lecture just went completely sideways today, and I expect the 231 will too, this is going to have to stand in for my hi, I'm your teacher this semester, and here are my druthers. I'm going to cover a couple basic concepts for you on philosophy, and I think we'll let it go at that for today, and we'll start out. Maybe I'll introduce you to Socrates. Okay. So, all right, I've asked you to try and get a hold of 2 different books. One of them is 5 Dialogues of Plato. The second book is Meditations on a First Philosophy by René Descartes. Probably the cheapest textbooks you'll ever be asked to buy. But, and of course, they're available through the university. I'm asking for you to get the Hackett editions because, in my experience, they've really been the best translations I've found thus far. They are available as ebooks. If necessary, there are free versions that are available online. However, I think it's the Abbott translation is one of the free translations, is the main free translation that's out there, and it's a lot older than the translation I'm asking you to purchase. It's a little bit more difficult to read because the language is archaic, is kind of old-fashioned. So if you have to, you gotta. I'm going to ask you to please read the introduction to the Euthyphro before our next lecture, so we can get started on that. So the Euthyphro, we think, is the first dialogue that Plato wrote about Socrates. I'll get back into that in a second, though. Okay. First, I want to introduce you to another idea. It's called the principle of charity. I've left this idea blank because there are as many different definitions of the principle of charity as there are philosophers. There's 2 interesting ideas that kind of come with this concept. One of them is the use of language itself in the context of studying philosophy. And I have to caution you that not only does philosophy have its own jargon, like every other enterprise, it often uses words that we use in everyday discourse to mean something else. So you'll be reading along and you'll see words that you recognize and think, oh, I know what this is about, and that it won't make any sense whatsoever. And it's because they're using words, the same word, to mean something else, which to me sometimes is worse than jargon, because at least jargon, you kind of look at it and you know that you don't know. And in this case, you're a little bit deceived into thinking that you might know what it's about. Okay. So charity in everyday discourse, we're talking about giving of ourselves, whether it's materially or our time or attention or whatever, to other people, freely of ourselves without any expectation of return, right? Giving to people who need money or food or clothes or shelter. And that's what it means to be charitable, right? In philosophy, the principle of charity means that we're going to engage in argumentation with one another, right? When we engage in kind of, philosophical debate and discussion, we're going to be charitable to one another. We're going to be kind to one another. We're going to have certain expectations that everybody who's engaged to the argument is engaged in an effort of good faith, right? As a good faith effort, which is to say that our intent is to debate honestly, not as a way of trying to say, gain bragging rights or something. But we're engaged in an honest, open attempt to try and discover the truth. What it really means to me, the principle of charity, is the idea is that no one has a monopoly on the truth. Not me, not you, not the professors that we're going to read, or not the philosophers that we're going to read. Okay? We can all be wrong. And we need to be humble about that fact. Everyone needs to recognize that we can all be wrong, and frequently are, and not to get in a snarl about it. Professors and kings, students and soldiers can all be both right or wrong. So to ensure that we listen to all ideas equally in our search for the truth, we ought to consider each idea as objectively as possible, whether it comes from us or from somebody else. So we also want to consider the ideas in their strongest possible form, their most logically appealing form. So when I'm engaged in a discussion with someone else and they make an argument that I recognize that it can be a stronger argument than what they're actually presenting, I am obligated to help them restructure their argument to be stronger, to take its strongest possible form. Whether I agree with them or not, I'm obligated to help them develop the strongest possible argument. So I say to somebody, we're arguing about whether, anyway, I have usually a representative case for this. It's a little controversial, but that really requires kind of active engagement, and I need to see you when I'm doing it to know how it's going. So this is I guess we'll have to leave it here. What I mean is, for your purposes, I expect you not only to be respectful of one another when we engage in discussions, which I've never had a problem with, I also expect you to be supportive of one another whether or not you agree. So even if someone opposes your position, your idea, but you see how they can do it better, you're obligated to help them do it better. Okay. So that's what the principle of charity is about. This is kind of an interesting document. This is about philosophy in general as a subject. I kind of like this illustration, at least in part because, it's kind of flawed. It's missing a lot of things. So philosophy is, love of, Sophia, right? Wisdom. Philos is love of, and Sophia is wisdom. And it's like every other kind of intellectual enterprise we engage in, there's a philosophy of it. But there's going to be several, kind of major groups that we're going to touch upon here. We're going to spend some time with certainly history of philosophy. We're going to study some metaphysics. We're going to study epistemology. Axiology is actually the philosophy of values, value judgments, whether, in this case, we're going to consider primarily ethics. Towards the end of the class, aesthetics is another branch of axiology. What is art? What counts as music? Politics, of course, is an important part of value judgments. We're not going to do a whole lot with logic in here, but we'll do some sort of informal argumentative logic, but not really formal very much. We're going to look at history of philosophy. We're going to start out looking at Socrates and Plato. We're going to take a look at Anselm of Canterbury. We're going to take a look at René Descartes, David Hume, Leibniz, and a whole slew of other philosophers. And history of philosophy, can be broken down both into evaluating the people themselves and sort of their roles and their ideas, where they come from, and the ideas themselves, kind of have a life of their own that goes beyond their creator. Metaphysics. This is sort of talking about what the nature of the world really is, independently of what we can perceive. What is the actual nature of the world? And this includes discussions about causality. Ontology is considerations of what it means for something to exist. And we're going to address this idea when we talk about, I want you to look at a particular argument called the ontological argument for the existence of God. Whether or not we can logically prove the existence of God independent of any reference to spirituality or faith. Universals is kind of a particular problem that Plato gets into. We're not probably going to spend a lot of time with that. We're going to do a little philosophy of religion in here, and we're going to do some philosophy of mind. So philosophy of mind, you're thinking about what is the mind, what is consciousness compared to the physical existence of being a living being. There seems to be this whole other realm that exists independently of our physical existence. And we're going to look at the mind-body problem and some of problems having to do with free will and determinism as well. So we'll spend a good bit of time in here. Epistemology, episteme, knowledge. We're going to talk about what it means to know a thing. What it is that we can know, and the epistemology and metaphysics are kind of interrelated in my mind. We'll take a look at skepticism, particularly we'll look at David Hume and Descartes. So that is kind of a representation of different ideas and some of the different fields in philosophy. There's also rationality theory. We actually have a professor, Lisa Cassell, who does work with rationality theory. I recommend taking her courses very highly. There's also a whole other sets of philosophy that are just not here at all. Philosophy of science, for instance, which is a really important idea of philosophy, which is studying, what does it mean for a scientific theory to be a good theory as opposed to another theory? Should it have predictive value? What do scientific theories even tell us? There's a lot of that. Professor Pfeiffer and I believe Professor Ehrlich both teach courses in philosophy of science, and I recommend those, also very highly. We also have some specialists in history of philosophy. Professor Schwab teaches ancient philosophy, and I think Professor Nance teaches modern philosophy, as well as think does some work in Kant as well. We have some really excellent folks doing some really cool stuff. And as we go along, I may introduce, overlapping other ideas as well. Yeah. And there's philosophy of language and logic and philosophy of mathematics. And yeah. So, anyway, we're just going to do some of this, and I'll try to point to the turnoffs as we go. All right, I think this is good for one day. Next time we'll start on an introduction to Socrates and Plato. Welcome to my introduction to philosophy.